Full Rules Podcast with me, Adam Duthie, episode number 3, I guess, depending on which order I release these. I think this will be 3. Today's guest was Mark DiSalvo. Mark is the head coach and owner of DiSalvo Performance Training in Chelsea in New York City. Mark is an old friend of mine from the Marcelo Garcia Academy, the second person from Marcelo's that we've had on the show so far, the first being Lydia Coleman. And yeah, Mark is a guy who I love talking to. We have a similar philosophy as it relates to S&C for combat sports. And Mark's been in the mix for a long time. He's been training grapplers as long as I've known him, and he's just a really great dude. Super chill, super positive, super insightful, and I really enjoyed talking to him. One of the things I really miss since going like mostly online since COVID has been collaborating with other coaches. And when I say other coaches, I mean like other strength and conditioning coaches. You know, I get to talk to a lot of sport coaches like jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, all that pretty frequently, which is great. But I really miss just the day-to-day interactions and tangential conversations that I would have with peers when I was working in the gyms. You know, I used to work with a group of really seasoned professionals, and I just draw so much inspiration from, getting a glimpse into how they view S&C and how they might approach a particular problem. Because I think one of the things that I think most like S&C pros come up against is like you just kind of get stuck in your own kind of like I call it like writer's block. Like, you sit down to write a program and you just have kind of a way that you like to do things, and you should have a way that you like to do things. You should have some type of system in place that makes sense to you and that you could rationalize and explain if questioned. However, there are many ways to skin a cat, and sometimes seeing the way somebody else does it can really open up like a whole new avenue to explore that the people in your care, your athletes and your clients will ultimately benefit from. And so that's one thing that I really miss about being in person. And so it's also one of the inspirations behind this podcast. I want to be able to just talk to professionals and really just use it selfishly as a way to, get some of that collaboration back in the mix for myself so that I can ultimately serve my athletes and clients better. So this was a great episode. We went for like an hour and a half. I think we could have easily gone another, half hour, 45 minutes. I had an appointment that I had to get ready for. And that's one thing I learned from this past episode is I need to book more time, buffer time before and after the episode to account for technical difficulties and letting the conversation kind of meander and go where it needs to go. So that's something I learned from these first 2 episodes. The same thing with Lydia is I had an appointment that I had to get ready for, and so we kind of had to wrap a little bit earlier than I would have liked. So we'll have them both on at some point again, hopefully. And I hope you enjoy this episode. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the chat if you are watching on YouTube or listening on YouTube. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can message me on Instagram at graybeardblackbelt.com. Nope, that's not an Instagram handle. At graybeardblackbelt. All right, never mind. I'm going to shut up now. Bye.
How the hell are you?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
Good, man. It's good to see you as always.
It's great to see you. That's like dreary morning here, but it was nice to come see your face. So I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's definitely like March in New York. It's very Marchy. Up here it's like cold and gray for the last like 5 months. I'm very much looking forward to springtime.
Yeah, I know that area too where you are. I've camped near there and encountered a lot of black bears in one night.
We actually just saw our first bear last night. My wife has this place
Really?
like fucking loaded up with trail cams, like every single, so any like suspect people out there lurking in the shadows understand this place is surveilled. Like we have like every single corner of this property with like a trail cam, and we saw our first bear last night, so it's coming.
That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the season.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, no, I was and I know this might not be the scope of the show, but it was a little over a year ago. I was camping there in the summer, and we saw 3 or 4 black bears per night. Like, and they would come they would come up against our tent. They would just be messing with everything. And usually it was the small ones,
Yeah.
but still,
Yeah.
you don't want to mess around with that.
apparently, I don't know if this is true. It's kind of like a little local legend, but they bring problem bears from other areas to, because we have such like the perfect ecosystem for bears. They bring like problem bears that get into more populated areas here, like they tag them and then bring them here. So I think we have like, I think something like 2,000 bears in like this kind of
Wow.
localized area. So it's we definitely see a lot of them.
And they seemed very comfortable with humans too, which was a little
Yeah.
unsettling for me.
Yeah, I got to get some like Khabib style grappling in with one of these
It's
baby
true. You can
bears.
use your mount retention, just stay like, or stay on their back.
Yeah. Oh man.
Uh,
So we had some more technical difficulties. I'm still kind of working out, but good old reliable Zoom. We're back. Mark, a little bit before we jump in, just tell me where you're from, a little bit about your origin story, how you got into jujitsu, all that good stuff.
well, I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Adam, I don't know how you're introducing things, but Mark DiSalvo. I've lived in New York City for almost 15 years. I've had a business here since 2015, a strength and conditioning gym, but I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I grew up playing hockey and I still love hockey to this day. It's kind of my first sporting love. So I still have a lot of fun watching that and getting involved there wherever I can, even though it's a little harder in New York City. And then I had friends kind of pushing ahead past the hockey thing that really got into Muay Thai when we were teenagers.
Oh yeah.
And I thought it was cool, but I never went and trained with them. I always thought it was they would show me what they were doing and this kind of stuff. And these were guys who were hockey players or they were guys on the football team because in Pittsburgh it's very, it's especially I think I might have grown up in one of the last eras there of like I mean, I think the blue collar working class thing is a little overplayed, but it still exists very much and it's a mentality there. So, when you're young, like you're going to be playing sports, it's not like it turns into this like bullying, like you must play football or whatever. And like if you're on a computer, like we're gonna beat you up. It was never like that. But at some point, whenever your interests diverged when we were kids, like you knew a kid from playing baseball or hockey or football and if you have any interest or proficiency, you're probably going to get shoved one way or the other. It's going to be hockey or football. And for me, it was hockey. And a lot of the football players were the guys who liked Muay Thai, ironically. So, and I they were the guys that kind of got me into it. And so we started watching, any VHS tapes we could rent at the corner video store. And that was where one of the early UFCs came into play. And we never could figure out if it was real or not. I remember that was the thing because it's kind of before the internet. We're like, is this real? Are these guys really doing
Yeah.
this? I think it's real, you
Looks
know?
real.
And yeah, and because we also love WWF or WWE now.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was always in the back of my mind. And I think my mom, if I really pushed and I said, hey, mom, I want to go train Muay Thai, or I want to go do this, she would have done it. But she wasn't, I was playing travel hockey. So she was driving me everywhere in the Northeast to play. So, and my dad too. So I don't think they were eager to like put me into something else where they would have to commit to like get me on something. But I love them and they love me. They would have definitely done it if I was pushing it. So once hockey was done, and I was in college. We moved a lot when I was a kid. So my hockey career kind of was never going to go anywhere because I was moving to places with like zero infrastructure and we were like pulling together rec leagues just for fun. And once I got to college, I'd say by the time I graduated and got out, like I definitely missed and I could feel myself missing. And I wasn't sure what I was feeling at the time. And I think a lot of young men feel this, women too, I'm sure, but I can relate most to young men, obviously is I think if they were involved in sports or team stuff or were in clubs in high school and college, like you leave that and then you're just kind of on your own.
Yeah.
And I was interested still in Muay Thai and striking sports from the earlier interest I had. And I all that time I was watching MMA and boxing and these kinds of things. And I had a friend. I worked at this gym in the city, and we would open up the gym at like 5 a.m. And we were working the front desk, and he's like, if you like martial arts, you should try jujitsu. And I won't say where he trained because I don't want to. But if you know me personally, you know this story. So, and he's like, you should train jujitsu. I think you'd really like it. And I said, why is that? And he said, there's something about you. I think you would like it. I know you don't love the whole like getting hit in the head thing. So, and he told me he trained. He was a blue belt. And at the time, and I said, well, where do you train? And he said, wherever he trained. And I
Yeah.
said, all right, well, can I come? He's like, don't train where I train. He said, but you should go check out. He said, you should go check out one of these schools. And this is New York City. And one of them was Marcelo Garcia. And that was the first one I went to. And from there, I was hooked. I mean, I went to the first intro class they did, and I was off and running.
I
And
didn't
it
realize
was,
Marcelo's. Sorry to interrupt you. I didn't realize Marcelo's was your first school. That's where you and I first
Mhm.
met. Okay,
Yeah.
so you were there from the beginning.
Yeah, I started and I was really, really lucky because because of the gym hours, I was working gym jobs, odd jobs, like all kinds of stuff that at that time, really the only time I could train was 8:45 at night. And Marcelo's had two classes a week at
Yeah,
8:45 at night. And it
that's
was
right.
perfect. And Bernardo taught them, Bernardo Faria. He had
Yeah, yeah.
just come from wherever it was. I think he was in Brazil. And he had just come over to be a teacher. And, he was kind of getting the short end of the stick with the class times, but he's a phenomenal teacher. And so my first 10 months of jujitsu were like exclusively with Bernardo and like me and the same like six or seven guys two nights a week, like reliably for almost a year. And then
Yeah.
I'd pop in on weekends when I could and that kind of thing. So I was very
So
lucky.
when did your schedule change? Because I know that I know you from the morning or afternoon classes, because that
Mhm.
was my kind of go-to was like the 11, 12 o'clock gi no gi.
Yeah. So that was when, after I had been training probably after I had gotten my blue belt in just under a year, which I thought was very inappropriate. I was like, I don't need this. Is like, I still don't know this at all. And they get, Marcelo gave it to me and Bernardo. And then I kind of took that as an endorsement, like, okay, you could probably train around a little bit. And it was around that time, kind of just circumstantially, and this comes back to, my coaching life too, is that I had saved up enough money to open my business
Mhm.
and DiSalvo performance training and was ready to make the jump. So I had like a job that was more or less a 9 to 5, as well as the gym job that I worked at during the day. It was like kind of like an 11 to 7, 11 to 8. I did so ironically, with all our technical difficulties, I did some post-production work. Mostly managing editors. So I didn't actually do all this stuff. So
Yeah, yeah,
just managing schedules. And so once that went away, it opened up, the seas sort of parted, because as you know, like when you're training full time, you're gonna, and you're trying to just really hustle. You're gonna be up in the early mornings. You might have some clients peppered in the middle of the day, and then your nighttime's busy. So the noon class became like the opportunity. And it was Marcelo teaching it, not far removed from his
yeah.
prime. And he was definitely like in his coaching prime. And it was a really special group of people then. And I was really fortunate to meet you and the guys that we always trained regularly with at that
Dude,
time too.
we had such a hard room, man. That was a brutal room. I remember like whenever I think
Hmm.
back to Marcel's, I just think back to this like one day in August. It was like a gi class, and this is like before the expansion. And
Hmm.
so like it was just hot as balls. And I mean,
Hmm.
people were just like training so I mean it was like a slip and slide. It was just people just everybody was training
Yep.
like a 10 out of 10. You know what I mean? It was
Yep.
just
a
oh
hundred
man,
percent.
so
Oh
good.
yeah. There were a lot of
Um
those days, and there was also so many. Yeah, it was so tough. It was that, and there were no like flow rolls, easy rolls, whatever. Which there's value in that, but I also see why, when I look back on it now, why there were times where I got so frustrated. You
yeah.
know, for
Yeah,
sure.
because everyone is like, there's like half the room is just always better than you at any given time. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, so it's just like such a good environment. So what some of the stuff you mentioned kind of leads into my next question. So you are the founder owner of DiSalvo Performance Training, and how long have you been in business, and how long have you had like your spot there?
So I've been in business for Salvo Performance Training since 2015. It was May of 2015. I started it I say we because I have people now working with me, but it was just me at the beginning.
Yeah.
But in 2015, I started in the financial district with Dr. Peter Wong, Reset PT. He's still in business down there, doing great. He was kind enough to lease me like a corner of his PT studio. And he let me put a rack that was much smaller than the one behind me. He let me put in like kind of whatever I wanted, as long as it just didn't make the PT studio feel too much like a gym, you know?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but he was pretty liberal with that and was a great landlord and is a great friend to this day. So I was there for 4 years. And then in 2019, I moved up to Chelsea. So it was May or June of 2019. So almost exactly 4 years later was when I opened the first dedicated gym studio in Chelsea at this same location. And it was half of the size of the gym I'm in now. And then, we had a really good year leading up to 2015, or excuse me, 2019, and then into 2020, and then COVID happened. But without going into too much detail, I mean, things ended up working out, and we came out of COVID, or I came out of COVID quite strong, and was really appreciative of the clients' loyalty and everybody who, wanted to help keep everything going. And so last summer in June, so June 23, we knocked down the wall because my neighbor next door moved out and basically doubled the size of the gym. So we're coming up on a year. It'll be this summer having this full space now. So, and we're going to be here for a while. So that's
Yeah,
kind
the
of the
place
short
looks
history.
amazing.
Thank
To
you.
anybody, I'll link like where people can find you in the show notes and stuff like that. But yeah,
Absolutely.
the space is amazing. If you're in NYC, definitely go check Mark out.
Thank you.
You've been training grapplers pretty much as long as I've known you. How did you did you kind of fall into that, or was it more so like you fell in love with jujitsu and then it was just kind of like an organic transition?
I think it was definitely a little more the latter because it was very intentional, but it was also because I really got into jujitsu.
Right.
But the main driver of it was the fact that it's, and this is where I don't want to say I feel old, but I feel like a lot of time has passed, to put it that way. But in 2014-ish, because that's when I started, there was no, and I truly mean zero, text on, and there were a few people, we'll probably get to them, but very, very little on training for jujitsu, like outside of jujitsu. Like the thing
Right.
you would hear from teachers all the time was just train jujitsu, that's all you need.
Yeah.
And all of the people who were trying to, like, strength coaches, trainers, and people outside of jujitsu who were sort of around the periphery, they were just treating them like MMA fighters or told them to do CrossFit or this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And Jiu-jitsu is not MMA. It's very different, the demands of it. And then if you were lucky, you might get somebody who was trying to be intelligent and say like, okay, well, this looks kind of like wrestling. This looks kind of like judo. Maybe we combine this, or maybe we take some of their modalities. And I kind of went down that road at one point too. But they're also very different because the number one thing is rules really dictate how you should train, like
Hmm.
outside of jujitsu, like the rule set. And that's the number one thing I've learned, coaching grapplers of all disciplines, not just jujitsu, is that the time of the round and like what the outcome is intended to be to win changes how you train in here.
Yeah.
And that's number one. And that's
Yeah.
what I realized.
Yeah. Interesting. So I'll jump ahead because that kind of fits nicely. What would you say is like your overall kind of training philosophy? Because I know you have like some
Mhm.
super competitive wrestlers on your roster right now, and as well as some kind of high level jiu-jitsu competitors. So like what would you say is like your kind of overall training philosophy that kind of
Mhm.
threads through all those different people?
I think that all athletes are individuals and people first. It's just kind of
Hmm.
something I've always operated on. It's why I never did really well as a group teacher or like in those group mentalities. And I have
Yeah.
people here working with me now who are way better at working with multiple people than I am because I'm not, and I wanted that here.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
terrible. I can't do group. My personality just won't like.
yeah,
I'm not a fucking cheerleader. Like I just can't do it.
no, me neither. But some people they can't they get bored with one-on-one. They're like, how do you fill an hour? I'm like, well, we're working out,
Yeah,
we're
yeah. I
talking,
love
yeah.
one on one. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so number one is the that the athletes being people first, and you really have to get to the bottom of like the issues they have. Like you have to start with maybe old injuries or like life logistics that you have to work around. Because if you don't figure that stuff out, you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, And so that's kind of number one. From the actual training, I think you and I are very similar like this. Similar, like we operate sort of with this, is that you have many tools in your tool belt. So don't like to deify or get very dogmatic about any one thing, because there's
Yeah,
different things that can help people at different times. I mean,
totally.
yeah, some things are just BS, but other things, but most things can have some value if they were brought forth by thoughtful people,
Yeah, I
by
totally agree. I feel like there's no such thing as like a bad system or bad exercise. It's just like bad application. And like
absolutely.
people like us who've been around a while, it's like we've seen so many like trends just come and go. It's like every couple of years, it's like this new
Hmm.
system comes out and they've got the secret handshake, and you better act now while you know what I mean, get on this band. And then it turns out
Hmm.
like after it gets kind of poked and prodded a little bit, that it's like I'm of the mind like everything fucking works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything works for a little while. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
that's about it. It's
Right.
like
If you're really simplifying it down, like everything kind of does work. You just need to know when to switch and kind of how to switch, And I think
yeah,
that's programming is the thing I probably took the most time to learn, and still take time to learn from the beginning, because I think my weaknesses early on as a coach were usually in kind of like, where do you take somebody after you have a really successful 6 weeks, and where, what is working hard, what is working light, like what is all of this, like these are just sort of general philosophical things.
yeah.
But I definitely always have real, if you were to, and I probably say this at my own peril because I know people like to pigeonhole and stuff, but if one thing that really appealed to me from even from when I was in college, and it still finds its way into just about everything I do, is a conjugate style programming,
Yeah.
because it operates primarily on variety being the key thing that you change the most. And to me, that's really important for grapplers, and it works really well because overuse injuries or just repetitive motion, it's very easy to just wear yourself out and wear yourself thin. So you don't want to do that here too. But variety isn't just like, I mean, it can be as simple as just saying like, okay, today I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and you're just kind of picking random things. But if it's random, you're going to get random results. So
Right.
you need to understand when you train that style, like how to create variety properly. Like, for example, because I don't want to speak too generally, I know people get annoyed with that, is that like if you're doing a bench press, for example, and you want somebody to progress with it, and you're going to use like a very conjugate style system, like it could mean every week or every other week you switch the bar, but it's still a bench press, and it might still be the same amount of reps, but you just switch the bar. And it's just little things like that, that understanding how to progress, understanding the strengths of different bars and pieces of equipment. But it does mean that you have to have kind of a lot of equipment, or you have to be really inventive. It's not a minimalist training philosophy. So if you are like one of these minimalist Spartan type people, you probably won't like it, but I'm not. So that's why it works for me. And that's kind of how I built my gym.
Yeah.
And in
Yeah, it's
that image.
interesting because I have the same kind of like it's the same insight. Like when variety or variability, whatever the hell you want to call it, is something that you value, you have to have the requisite tools to do the job. Like I'm looking
Hmm.
in my camera here, and I got my aqua bag back here, and then I got like
Hmm.
my Bulgarian bags, and I have like
Right.
specialty bars down in my gym, and it's like you can't really do that if all you have is a hammer. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you need like an entire toolbox to be able to do that kind of stuff. And I couldn't agree more, because I think conjugate's a great method as well, because combat athletes need a little bit of everything. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like we can't
Yes,
just like have
exactly.
like just a strength block and then like not revisit like some type of dynamic stuff,
Hmm.
5 months down the road. It's like that's not going to cut the mustard. Like we really kind of have to have
Exactly.
like 60% across the board on like all physiological qualities.
100%. Yeah. I think, that's the other part, the other half of it that you completely nailed, is that, yeah, you have to have so many qualities. And I've never believed that life for an athlete, unless you're a strength athlete, and I spend a lot of time around strength athletes, but unless you're a strength athlete, like you need so many different qualities to be successful. And you can't really, life doesn't exist in a vacuum, and your training doesn't exist in a vacuum. How you progress doesn't either. And you need to, your training needs to account for that. Like you need to kind of cover everything. And like kind of what we call conjugate, it comes from, it's basically Western interpretations of Eastern, like as in Soviet and Russian
Right.
style training. And they, the more that gets translated, the more I see, and the more people I've met who like will give me these manuals and books and stuff like that, the more you see like these observations. Like if you're in a gym and you're listening and you're a coach or a trainer, like you probably make a lot of these observations. Like these same guys were making the same observations in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s with their Olympic athletes, and they kind of came up with a system for it. So to me, it's like it just seems like obvious, but it's an art too. So it is like learning jujitsu or Muay Thai or wrestling, that you sort of have to watch how people adapt and train and like yeah, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you mentioned that you have to see the athlete as a human being first, or
Mhm.
as an individual first, and I couldn't agree more with that. What is kind of like your starting volume kind of like template for like
Mhm.
an athlete? Obviously that can change once you kind of see how they are responding to a program, but like what's your typical kind of go-to if somebody's, because I've experienced that most combat athletes, surprisingly to some people maybe, that
Mhm.
they have such a low training age, like in the gym, like a lot of
Mhm.
them, like they're fucking savages on the mats and they feel strong and they feel athletic. And then like you put them under a bar and it's like a fucking baby giraffe. Like they don't know what, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And so,
it is. Yeah.
and so like you kind of have to really like, holy shit, you have to really kind of pull back and dose that volume and intensity, of course, appropriately.
Mhm.
So what's your kind of like go to start?
The well, it's funny you said that too. That well, I'll answer the go-to first. The go-to is that I got this from Charles Poliquin, but I think every good coach first starts with an assessment, and they try to figure out the weaknesses and the strengths of the person, and maybe what's lacking or old injuries. But it's what Charles Poliquin called structural balance. So your first phase is always designed to even everything out, and that's mostly through unilateral exercises. Not
Mhm.
always, but often. So the first month is usually a lot of that kind of stuff. We'll pepper in stuff that's bilateral. I like and I enjoy teaching the power lifts, and I enjoy, or their derivatives. Like they don't have to look like a power lifter, but they do need to be able to squat under some bar here, and they do
Yeah.
need to be able to deadlift with some bar here. Same with the bench, that kind of thing. But they, that will pepper in maybe with like a bamboo bar or something, like some kind of instability to help sort of create that groove, so they sort of understand like how they need to kind of push through. And I think the bamboo bar or earthquake bar, any of those ones, they teach that really, really well. So yeah, that lasts about 4 weeks. But the thing that is funny when you mention the baby is that I think unless they have people have weight room history, their training age, yeah, it's always very low, and they're usually not great in here. And you don't have to be great in here, but
Right.
you do need to kind of take it seriously and learn it to get better. And it's usually the thing that differentiates. One thing I've noticed, because I'm sure all types of people would listen to this, like the thing that distinguishes like a white belt who's a lawyer, or the purple belt who like has a job and a family, and then maybe, a very elite athlete in jujitsu, like ADCC style competitor, like former winner kind of thing. The thing that distinguishes them is usually they pick it up very fast. Like
Yeah.
the elite, like that athletic mold, like you teach them a deadlift, like they're acing it within like 2 sessions. Like
Yeah.
they've taken all your cues, they look like pros, and then you can kind of mess around. And those people, you talk about variety, those are the people that just like eat that for breakfast. Like it's
Yeah.
actually really good for them. But the less proficient you are, it doesn't make you a bad person. It's just like that's just where we all are. And I'm certain I am not. I mean, everything, I'm not that person with like learning that fast with these things. So I totally can relate to the other end. And that's why I train a lot of people. We're just amateurs just having fun, and they
Yeah.
want to just train jujitsu better. But those people we might spend longer with a lift, or those structural balance phases last a lot longer sometimes. And that's fine because, if you can make sure you can feel your hamstrings and your glutes, if it takes you 3 months to get there or longer, well, once you can do that, you're going to make a lot more progress. Like you'll be able to deadlift and do all these other things, and it'll just kind of be that constant progress that you see people post on Instagram, like where everyone's always making progress.
Yeah.
Like if you're not making progress like that, there's probably something off, and you got to figure it out. And I have so many examples of it going both ways. Like I have one client, or had one client, who was really successful, but he was a little stubborn at first about like wanting to really lift heavy. And once I let him kind of blast off, but then, he hit his limit, and then he couldn't make progress past there. And then he started getting those aches and pains. And, I don't want to be irresponsible as a trainer. So at a certain point, like you're kind of creating that buy-in, and I did have to pump the brakes on him after a few weeks and say, okay, now it's time. And that's a thing that you have to do sometimes. It's not immediate, like do what I say. Sometimes you have to let things play out,
Yeah.
just for them to blow up a little bit. You're never hurting anybody, but people don't just listen to you instantly all the time,
Yeah.
that's part of it.
It's so funny. That's like such a I'm laughing because that's like such a mature coach thing to do. Cause like in the beginning, like when I was like my first couple of years, people would want to do something and I would give them these like detailed, elaborate explanations as to why it's probably not a good idea. And now I'm
Yeah.
just like, okay, hot shot, like let's see what you got.
Yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? Like within reason. And then like it's like the dad who like lets you stick your finger in the electrical outlet to teach you
Yeah.
that electricity bad. You know what
Right,
I mean? And so I'm
exactly.
just like, okay, go ahead. Let's see how this goes,
Yeah, put a fork in there, see what happens. Yeah. No, the
Oh
fork might
man.
be me being like, okay, no, you have to stop. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no,
Um,
it's true. You go through these, you realize a lot of it, you ask about like the philosophies too. I think taking time to create buy-in, and that was another thing that Poliquin taught me, and I was very lucky to get to know him a little bit before he died, is he said relationships are built at the speed of trust. So
mm,
I never try to rush things, and you just show people you care, because if you do care, it will come out. And you check in with them, you see how they're feeling after a workout. If they need a little bit more supervision, you might have to stay on them a little bit more about eating right or drinking water or whatever it is. But that shows people that you care, and then that's usually when the magic happens. It's not like you can't just order people around like a drill sergeant from day one,
yeah,
that kind of thing.
totally. Yeah, I'm a huge believer in like under promising and over delivering. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like just like I feel like the fitness and strength and conditioning industry is a challenging one for like the first couple of years. But
Hmm.
if you have any type of like drive and like care about building relationships like you're talking about, like
Hmm.
you immediately separate yourself from like 90% of the pack.
100%. a hundred
um
percent. I tell people, younger people, that all the time, or even people who are just newer to the industry of any age, and I think people find that hard to believe sometimes, but yeah, just there's so many simple human things that are differentiators. And now that I hire people, and I'm always looking at like coaching prospects and people who I want to be here coaching, that's stuff I look for too. Like I'm looking at, you know, like, do you care? Is there follow through? Because a lot of the nuts and bolts you can teach,
yeah.
and that's okay. I know people say that a lot, and there is limits to that, but it is true though. Like there's a lot of people much smarter than me who have written books on all of these things, but the sort of just the human aspect, the compassion, the, like I said, the follow through, all of that stuff, it separates you so much. And that's why I think this industry too, these statistics are probably old, but like it used to be like the average person starts and is out in under 2 years. It was like some very large percent. But then the next benchmark of like time in the industry is like almost 7 years. So in other words, if you get, or 5 years maybe, it was an odd number, I remember. So it's like if you get past 2 years in this no man's land, now you're like really in it. But there is a no man's land. The 2 years is the trap. And once you get out of the 2 years, then you're actually like probably very poised to do well. It's kind of like Steve Maxwell used to tell me, he only gave his purple belts to people he felt like weren't going to quit. So that kind of
Yeah.
thing, that sort
Yeah.
of thing.
That
Mhm.
tracks too. Like I've heard the 2 year thing, but I haven't heard anything about like beyond that 2 years. But that definitely tracks because how many people have you
Mhm.
seen come and go in this industry? And then like there's the people that kind of make it through those, and like they seem to be pretty steady. Like you and I,
Right.
we've been talking S&C for like God knows how many, however long, and there's like a
Mhm.
bunch of us out there who kind of like weather that storm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's like people have to want to hang out with you for an hour. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
like
exactly.
you have to have the human piece. You know what I mean? Like I knew this one kid I used to work with at a at this gym that shall remain nameless, and like the kid was brilliant. I mean, he was super smart. He could like quote you super training like chapter and verse. You know what I mean? The kid like
Yeah.
was just like a technician, but
Mhm.
like he was an asshole. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like just like a complete. I didn't want. I wouldn't want to have a cup of coffee with the guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he couldn't get business because he was an asshole. So it's like like
Right.
you have to have again like 60% across the board. You don't have to be perfect, but you got to be like kind of all systems go.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's a thing, that it should show you too how vast and sort of different the different niches are inside of strength and conditioning too, because that personality might work really well in a college setting or like a pro
Yeah,
setting, particularly like
yeah,
college or high school, because like those people that's like a captive audience. Like when you
right.
work like we do, these people are customers, but they're also, it's like this weird non-customer relationship because you guys are, we're embarking on something difficult together. So you do become friends, you do become close. It's a special type of relationship. So, you know, if that's you, then that's awesome. But if that's not you, it doesn't mean that like strength and conditioning isn't for you. It's just you're probably doing it in the wrong place.
Yeah,
But also
yeah.
you still like if you're an asshole, like people in college weight rooms aren't going to want to listen to you either. So
But
that's the
that's
other.
a good insight because it's like they just
Mhm.
have to do what's on the card. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And like that's he can go sit in his office and after writing the most elaborate program whatever, but that interpersonal piece might be better served in that
Yeah.
environment.
There's so much. I think that's another thing about combat sport athletes. And if you're working with combat sports specifically, it's an individual sport, but there is a big team behind it. But because it's an individual sport, the the sort of relationship and the time you spend with the athlete and and like when I say athlete, I mean from pro all the way on down to just someone who goes to class 3 times, 2 times a
Yeah,
week, who comes in and trains. Um, it's a different relationship. It's like, you really have to talk to them, understand what training's like. It's not the same as like a sort of team mentality. And I get it because like in football, the teams are too big to take too individual of an approach.
yeah,
But one thing I've learned spending a little bit of time around football, I've had friends that have gone into that and I've gotten to spend time at like off-season camps for NFL guys and this kind of stuff. And is that they kind of still crave the same thing. And when they're going to private trainers in the summer and the off season, like these are the same kind of relationships that they're actually forming with those trainers that
mhm,
aren't part of their team. So
yeah,
it's a human thing. Like it's the longer I do this, the more I realize that that's so much of it.
yeah,
And not that I ever thought it wasn't, but I'm always reminded of how
yeah,
much it is.
yeah. Totally. You mentioned Steve. How did you get plugged into to knowing Steve Maxwell? Because I know you guys have had uh
Mhm.
kind of a long standing relationship.
Yeah, so Steve, I mean, I remember the first time I met him was not in person actually. So I actually did years ago with one of my old colleagues that I used to work with, and he's a great friend to this day. His name's Froylan Sanchez. He's a very accomplished runner actually, and a very good running coach. So if you're in LA, you should look him up. He's excellent. But Froy and we did in like maybe 2012 or 13, like so going back over 10 years, we started a podcast together called Functional Meatheads, and we recorded like
Nice.
we recorded over 100 episodes. I think
Oh
we ended
wow.
up posting about 100, but we recorded many more. And it was before there were a lot of fitness podcasts and before there were really a lot of podcasts. And I wish we had stuck with it, but that's besides the point. But Steve was one of our guests. So we had heard about Steve. I don't even remember how. I think Troy actually had his old DVD, Encyclopedia of Joint Mobility.
Mm,
And back then too, like people, and you'll remember this, like strength and conditioning was very meat-headed for a long time, and I like that, but there's also a lot more to it. than just that. And Steve was one of the few people who was making DVDs and things back then that were trying to talk about things beyond just lifting weights and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And we're like, well, let's look him up. And Steve was starting around that time to be like quite a podcast darling himself, like a great guest on a lot of podcasts. He was very good friends and was for a short time was Joe Rogan's trainer. So like
Oh, I
he
didn't
was
know
on,
that.
yeah, so he was on Joe Rogan's show in the earlier days. And like we're like, all right, well, he'll definitely want to do a podcast or hopefully. And so we reached out and he agreed and we had a great conversation with him. And then we just kept in loose touch. Like he knew I trained jujitsu, and we actually ended up being in San Diego at the same time, like maybe about less than a year later. And I realized we were in the same town, so I emailed him and I said, "Hey, are you around? Like, do you want to get dinner or lunch or something or coffee?" And he goes, "I don't get dinner with people." He goes, "But I'll work out with you." So I was like, "Okay." He's very
Awesome.
honest.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Cool, where at?" And he said, he told me this park and like he said, "Meet me here." And it was like really close to where I was. And he said, "Hey, do you have any kettlebells or anything?" And I did because I was at my parents' place at the time and I had kept a few kettlebells there. And I said, "I'll drive them over." And so we started working out, we were hanging out and talking about jujitsu. And his videographer happened to be there. And we started talking about this old breathing ladders workout that I don't know who invented. I always thought it was Steve, but Steve forgot it. And he was like, "Where did you learn this?" And I said, "I thought it was you, but I don't know, you know?" And so he said, "Well, let's film this." And it turned into like a really well, it wasn't a DVD, it was like a video download, but they edited it into a thing you could download. And it's ended up selling and doing really well. And we at that point that we're kind of like off and running. And then at a certain point, he asked me after many like kind of what would you call it? Like we'd run into each other at seminars, like I'd go to a seminar. He asked me if I wanted to assist him on like one of his longer things. And then it kind of became like a more official sort of apprenticeship kind of
Yeah.
deal. He's in jujitsu awesome because he was one of the first dozen American black belts, and he was the first American that Helson Gracie gave a black belt to. And that was at a time where Brazilians were not eager to give black belts out to Americans. Not all of them, but
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
was a reason there wasn't a lot of Americans. And he had to go through like the ringer to get it, I know, like the Helson tests and the people you had to train with and roll with. And he always told me like one of the reasons he liked me is he always says he's like at my age he goes I like blue belts. He's like because he was like I can run. He's like I can roll hard with you guys and like I can feel good like I'm rolling with like 20 or 30 somethings hard, but you're a blue belt and
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm basically a coral belt. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, but I mean
Uh,
Steve will still mess you up. He's still so competent on the mats. He's that epitome of that Bruce Lee quote, like, "I fear not, the man who knows 10,000 things, but the guy who practiced one thing 10,000 times." He has
yeah.
moves that he just, are coming and you cannot do anything to
The
stop
best.
them. Yeah.
The best.
There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's kind of my longer. I could go into more detail like origin story with him, but he was very good to me, especially early in my career, introduced me to so many people. I got to travel a lot with him and do all these seminars and help teach them. And then around the time when he was wanting kind of to slow down with that, I was getting busier here in New York
Yeah.
and it really, I mean, without him at the beginning, I mean, it would have been much more difficult. Like, I don't know if it would be even look halfway the same as it is today.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful to have met him.
Like going back to relationships, right? It's like, this like simple seeming kind of innocuous action, like, "Hey, would you like to go have dinner?"
Mhm.
Turns into this like amazing mentorship and like
Yeah.
impactful thing however many years later. It's just like it matters like what you say and what you do, you know what I mean? Like I feel like just putting yourself, that's one of the reasons I started this thing, because I was thinking about it for a long time and I'm like, just fucking do it, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
fucking like who cares, just fumble through it and just get out there and do it. And it's like shit like that happens. Yeah, such an inspiring story, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, but it's true. I'm glad you do it. I mean, your perspective on I've always loved your perspective on things. I mean, besides liking you a lot personally, I
uh,
I appreciate your perspective on things. And it's always thoughtful, and you're doing it. Like you're a guy that's always doing this stuff. Like I try to measure myself against people like you because I'm like, well, Adam's doing Muay Thai fights. I mean, I'm not going to do a Muay Thai fight, but like, he's out there, he's competing, he's training. I know he trains, he's teaching, and I'm not a frequent Instagram poster, but I have a very strict schedule I stick to at jiu-jitsu. The guys I train with know I'm always there the same days, same times. I never miss a lift here. I have to be like having a fever, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I get inspired by people like you. And I think that that's an important thing that people put that out there.
Yeah, thanks, man. I have a kind of a love hate thing with social media for the longest time, and then like I just realized like recently it's like none of this fucking shit is real. Like who cares? Like I'm trying
No,
to
it's not.
like for so long I was trying to like play this like trainer guy character, you know, and talking like a weatherman because I don't talk like that. I'm from Queens. I'm nasal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I curse, and like
Right.
lately, the last like several months, I've just been like, you know what? Like this is me. I don't care. Like it or fucking fuck off. Like I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
it's actually I've been having like so much more fun. You know what I mean? I'm just like
Yeah.
not
Just being
overthinking it.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It's freeing in a lot of ways. I mean, for if I don't know if it's interesting or not, but one thing I've learned now, because I like having a gym, it's not really like if you're on social media a lot and just as a consumer and you're looking at fitness Instagrams or you're looking at jujitsu Instagrams, strength conditioning, whatever it is, like it's easy to get kind of lost in both for the trainers and the clients and just anyone. I think it's easy to kind of get very confused and or have one image of like this is how it looks. But when you're running like a brick and mortar business, it's like it's kind of very old school. Like people have been doing this for a long time and you
Yeah,
realize, and I'm glad I enjoy it because it's very different from Instagram. It's like it's
yeah.
not the reality of things. So when I
No,
post things there, I just try to post what people are doing. Like I'm happy for their accomplishments. Like I am gonna only typically make people look good. I'm not gonna like post somebody's
yeah.
falling off of a plyo box or something, but maybe I should. I don't know. But yeah, it's and then I work more with marketers and people that help me out with that stuff now. And you got to play to your strengths. I mean, I think for you having this podcast is awesome because I think you are a thoughtful guy and the longer form is a good thing for me. I really like writing. So like a lot of I'll give a quick plug, a lot of my writing, that's most of how I put content into the world. So
Yeah,
it's on my website, DiSalvotraining.com, or now also I've had a Substack for over a year. The Substack is more like a journal, so you're going to get very unfiltered thoughts.
yeah.
Whereas on the website, it's going to be a little more methodology oriented, and it's like stuff that like I work with marketing guys who tell me you should write about this. People like this stuff, and I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's all good stuff, but you're gonna probably get less commentary on the website. On the Substack, you'll get a lot more of my commentary, and that's just what I chose to dig in on because I can do that. I can wake up in the morning and write that. I can do that on a Sunday. I can, for me, it's a little harder to get the camera going and make time or do this sort of thing, but I think you just kind of have to pick one and do it. Whatever makes you
Totally.
happy.
Our fucking attention spans are like diminishing by the minute. And like that's
Hmm.
one of the reasons why I think the long form stuff is better. Cause like I can't cram all of my competing thoughts into a 30-second Instagram video. You have these
Yeah.
people that like come at you on Instagram, like, well, you actually should have mentioned. I'm like, dog, like, sorry, this 30-second video didn't capture enough nuance for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But your Substack is awesome, and I'll put all links to this stuff in the show notes so that anybody listening can take a peek. It's just like really great stuff, and it's like
Well, thank
actionable.
you.
Like you don't give a lot of like bullshit. It depends answers. Like you give like people like, okay, you can do this. Like here's like a plan. You know what I mean?
No, thank
Which is
you.
like really
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah,
I love the it's depends answers, but it's also like it doesn't help. It like makes people
yeah,
more confused, I realized,
yeah.
and they
Like
just
it always
wanna,
depends. Like, but like
yeah,
give them something. You know what I mean?
right. You have to try, and that's another thing for anybody listening too, is if you're it doesn't matter what your level is, if you're amateur, hobbyist, whatever, all the way up to like a pro, like you do have to try things and see what works and doesn't. Like you can't just be like scared into an action. You have to
Yeah,
actually try and fail a little bit. Like I would much rather, and this is usually what happens, I would much rather somebody come in here who competes a lot, doesn't matter what the level. I would much rather them come in and tell me like a crazy schedule they did than somebody who did nothing, you
Yeah.
know? That's
Yeah.
because we can work with your schedule and like maybe remove a thing here or add a thing there. And that will give you so much more compliance and probably results than me trying to like reinvent the wheel for you,
Yeah, totally.
that kind of thing.
You're such a positive dude, and I've always been struck by that. So I'm gonna bring you down to my pessimistic negative
Okay.
level right now to make myself feel better. So
Sure.
what's something in contemporary S&C that really grinds your gears?
Ooh, oh man. I have one really comes to mind. Trying to be diplomatic, but I have a few. I have a few. I think this one, you know what it is? Yeah, I won't even censor myself. I think it's really interesting because when I first started doing this like as a career, it was physical therapists, and I know you're in physical therapy school. They were usually the ones with the the spaces or like the brick and mortar places,
Mhm.
and at least in New York City. I'm speaking mostly to New York City. And there weren't a lot of boutique gyms. There weren't a lot of gyms my size. There weren't a lot of options outside of like the big box stuff.
Yeah.
And so there was a really, especially amongst that generation of physical therapists. So we're talking about people who are at their youngest, probably 35 right now, but we're talking guys, men and women into their 50s, maybe even. They were very generous in like kind of lending space to
Yeah.
people like me, people like Peter, he did for me. But I noticed this trend that I don't like now that I'm noticing that um, there's a there's like a lack of effort between I don't want to pick on just call it younger generation, but I think that you talk about attention spans and it's there. There's a
Mhm.
lack of willingness, I think, for trainers and PTs to work together. And
Yeah.
that bothers me because I think each side wants to do like kind of everything. And, like in other words, now because I'll break it down actually because I have a lot of thoughts on this. So you'll
Yeah.
have trainers sometimes, and it's not always their fault. Like they're working with somebody, and someone has some type of injury. The trainer says, "Hey, go to a physical therapist. Go get this checked out." But the person and the client sometimes is responsible because like they might be too lazy to like, "Oh, can't you help me? Can't you give me a few exercises?" And it's
Yeah.
like it's like I can try, but you really should go. And a lot of times that's on the client. So I will absolve us of some responsibility, but not all, because
Right.
at some
Yeah.
point you do
Yeah.
have to insist. But then on the flip side, I also see a lack of willingness of a lot of physical therapists to then move on from the recovery training or like the healing or whatever you would want to call it, the actual physical therapy to be like,
Yeah.
hey, now you need to go to Mark. Now you need to
Yeah.
be trained hard. And sometimes now they try to do both and be making strength programs also. And I think if you know how to do that, great. A guy like
Right.
you will know how to do that.
Right.
But I think I wish we all work together better. And I'm noticing there's so many competing businesses there here now like that. And there's so many competing messages. And if I was a client or an athlete, I would be a little confused and probably pissed off too. But it's just like a trust to work with each other. I mean, I have PTs I work with and like quite a bit. And so it's not an indictment of the field or anything like that.
Right.
It's
Right.
just how we all work together would would probably save a lot of people more time and money. Like if we had sort of more clearly defined or just discussions like where does my scope end and whatnot, and just showing each other that mutual respect. And I've never noticed that until really the past few years. That's something that's bothered me a little because I think it just hurts the progress for the client the most, unfortunately.
Yeah, the client suffers the most. I that's an interesting insight because I've always had like some solid PTs that I've worked with. I have my
Mhm.
buddy Dr. Matt Tolstoy and Charlie Weingroff
Those are great names.
who have seen a lot of my people,
Hmm.
and it was always a very symbiotic relationship where like Charlie would bring me in and like watch have me observe the session and then like give me because we spoke a common language would give me stuff and Matt was constant
Hmm.
communication. But like I've noticed that for some other people like early in my career before I had developed those relationships, it was just like a one-way pipeline. Like they were never sending the people back to me,
Yeah.
and I feel like so much one of the reasons like I'm just interested in PT and rehab because I want to be able to kind of help people across
Yeah.
the entire spectrum.
Hmm.
But like there's like the return to sport or return to just like physical activity is just so lacking. It's like I had to do
Yeah.
observation hours in order to apply to this PT school. So I was like in this clinic, and most of the people, they weren't athletes. And so, I guess what they were doing was fine. But there was like a couple of athletes. And I'm like, how is this, laying on a table with like a pink rubber band,
Hmm.
helping this kid who wants to get back on the football field? Like, how is that going to help them? Like, they need to like some type of graded
Yeah.
exposure to like, just tissue tolerance. It was just like, it was really interesting. So
Yeah.
that's a great insight.
I think that, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I have, I mean, that's the other thing though, is that the two guys you mentioned that your PTs, I know Weingriff, I don't know him, but I mean, he's kind of like a monolith of a pillar of, that world. And, so he's very knowledgeable, secure. Like like a guy like that, that's amazing to hear. And I know I would trust that that would happen. The people I work with, to plug again, like Peter Wong, who I was my landlord for a while, and then another person here in the city, Dr. Evelyn Herrera. We have that same type of relationship. Like we're sending people back and forth, and it's just kind of like a sort of conveyor belt, like when it's needed to be, but more cyclical, obviously. And I think that that's the thing. I think maybe it's more of a security thing, and it's maybe younger people who just haven't quite figured it out yet. I'm not not picking on younger people, just like
Yeah.
you're trying to be a one-stop shop. You're trying to do a good job, but sometimes doing a good job is just having a team. And that's one thing, especially this past year or two, that I'm very struck by even more. Not just the team we're building here, but I'm the wrestler who you mentioned earlier, I'm working with. It's an Olympic hopeful. Like I talk to her coach all the time. Like
Yeah.
we're talking constantly about, we have a spreadsheet of her like wrestling periodization and just like how much round time she's going to be doing, what the intensity should be like what days practice are. And it's like, that's something jujitsu guys men and women could take away too, is like
Yeah.
that level. If like that's the Olympics. So if you aspire to be like a world champion, like you should treat yourself like an Olympian. And that's what Olympic wrestlers do, with their
Yeah.
coaches.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
yeah. So there's that for sure. But yeah, so I'm trying to think. How about you? What's one of your things that
That's
grinds your gears?
the only reason I asked you is so that you would ask me what, so I could share my resentments. Man, what grinds my gears? So I get it. We could sit here all day, but like, I think one thing I'm noticing lately is just like shitty take after shitty take about recovery.
Hmm.
Like all these like 25-year-old uh strength coaches talking about how like overtraining isn't real and like recovery is fake and all. I'm like, dog, like
Hmm.
you're like doing like hypertrophy rep ranges and volumes and like playing fucking basketball. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, you know what I mean? Like go do like two hard grappling sessions, go
Hmm.
spar some Muay Thai with some fucking killers. Do that 5-6 days a week,
Yes.
at 30 plus years old for like
Hmm.
3 months, and then come back to me and talk that bullshit that overtraining
Yes.
isn't real. Give me a
Yes.
fucking break. You know what I
It's
mean?
like
Like,
it's like the same people who say technique doesn't matter. So you found my other one that kills me.
yeah,
That one I
yeah,
hate. I want to throw my phone out the window when I
yeah.
see that
Like
stuff,
it, like it, like it, like under a bar, you mean?
Yeah, under a bar. Yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah,
not talking
yeah,
about
yeah,
jujitsu. I know jujitsu
yeah,
has yeah.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
like under a bar, it's like, are you crazy?
You have a physical constraint on you. Like that is
Yeah.
such a constrained environment. Like your shit better be buttoned up nice and tight. You know what I mean? Because otherwise you're going to
Hmm.
be blowing, discs out left and right, man. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
you need to know there is a spectrum, that's for sure. But man, but when you say there is a spectrum, that also means that there's ends to that spectrum, and you can be
Yeah.
fucking stupid and it can be wrong,
Yeah.
Like it's that doesn't mean that like everyone's right.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there is,
Yeah.
yeah, that's something that really gets me going pretty badly. I hate that too. But it's funny when you mentioned the recovery isn't real thing. I haven't seen much of that, but I have seen a little, so I do know what you're
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about. For years, this is one thing where I will fully admit I was wrong about something, or at least my suspicions were like incorrect. And I was very suspicious for a long time of HRV. And
Mm.
like this is after having like I had conversations in person with like Dr. Andy Galpin and Joel Jameson and all these people, and asked, and
Smart guys.
they exactly, and they were very gracious with their time, and they're super nice people. I just it wasn't like I was doubting them. It was just I couldn't find like how to sort of apply this. And that might sound silly to some people listening because, and you've probably heard this too, that, or you listening maybe with your Whoop strap, you might be like, well, I woke up and felt fine, but it says that I'm doing terrible and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And this is where the whole recovery thing comes like kind of full circle, is that I realized, and this is going to be like the duh statement of the moment, but it is entirely tied to your heart. It is entirely tied to your heart rate. So like people who
Yeah.
just lift or are going and being like, Gen Z bodybuilders and just going to the gym and like you said, shooting hoops, you're never really straining your heart rate enough to the
Right.
point that it's ever going to, and the heart rate is really where it's like one half of the recovery debt. And the other one is like that nervous system debt. But
Mhm.
most people, and it's not a slight to people, unless you're lifting a lot of weight, I don't think most people can actually drive themselves that into
Yeah.
that type of fatigue.
You
So
like you
from
never even touch 90%. It's like what, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like you don't need to worry
exactly.
about that.
So your fatigue is not neural usually, it's going to be volume based and like not sleeping and bad lifestyle stuff. So, for a lot of those people, I'm just kind of like, wow, that's like if you're not ever touching those heart rates and you're in your 20s, it makes sense to me that like you're feeling fine. Because I actually felt that way too at certain points. Like even in my
Mhm.
earlier 30s, like I I would be like really laying off cardio and endurance training, but I'd be lifting a lot and training jujitsu. I'd be like, I'm fine. But now when I keep an eye on my heart rate and like resting heart rate, and I have different like standard tests I do to myself and other clients, and like lately it's actually been dropping, and it's no in a bad way and it's actually no surprise because I haven't been training it. And
Yeah.
so like that type of stuff like really informs a lot, I actually think. So I really came to realize that the deconditioning of people is what really shows up in HRV. So
Mm.
when I start to see scores that are not good, or people when with the Whoop that have like low strain scores, like it doesn't take much for them to hit their daily limit, I'm asking a lot of questions now about like, well, how conditioned are you? Like how, like, let's talk about it. Like, do you run? Do you do any cardio? Like,
Yeah.
what is that like? Is it just jujitsu? Like, how old are you? And these kinds of things. And I work with a number of clients too that are in their 70s and 60s. And that, let me tell you, becomes a huge thing when you're that age too, because it's ultimately the heart that lets you do everything. Like, and when
Yeah.
they talk about having good cardio for recovery, it just means like can you manage and sustain certain heart rates that might come up like after a heavy set? Like for you and me, they might be low right now because we're in decent shape. But like if you're not in decent shape, if you've ever been around powerlifters who are really good, like they do like their they'll do like their third attempt and they look like they're gonna croak. And it was a deadlift that took 3 seconds,
Yeah. Yeah.
like literally they look like they're gonna die. And that's because they're just so deep, they've maxed out. It's like a character on a video game. They've maxed out strength and force, but they just like it was a min max. Like they pulled the cardio down as low as it could possibly go.
Yeah.
So, and that happened, that creeps. And if you're not careful, that can happen to you. And that's why HRV can be really valuable if you're a data-driven person. I'm not really, but for my clients that are, I have to be, because they respond to that better than me just talking to them.
Yeah.
It's like I'll be like, hey,
Yeah.
check that out. Look what you did here. And that doesn't look so great. And then they'll be like, oh shit, I have to I have to do more cardio.
Yeah, you can see like meaningful changes in heart rate, not even just HRV, but just like resting heart rate. Like if you put somebody
Hmm.
on like a basic kind of just cardiac output, like LSD or whatever the hell we're calling it this week, like zone two kind of like
Hmm.
intensity, like you'll see a change in resting heart rate within like a week, probably. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's such like an elastic, and then if it snaps back if you don't train it, like you mentioned, you kind of have
right.
to kind of keep that topped off. And it's also like just a plug for conditioning in general. Like even if you're like a more of a strength athlete listening to this, like you're gonna recover quicker the more conditioned you are. Like you
It's true.
restock ATP like so much quicker. Like if I have two athletes and one of them does conditioning and one of them doesn't, and they have like equal skill and strength levels, like I'm always going to bet on the more conditioned athlete because they just have
Absolutely.
more of that stuff to like kind of go around.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
important.
Absolutely. I think the conditioning aspect of a lot of this too is like it's like for jujitsu, because I know we're talking a lot about combat athletes too. So not just jujitsu, but the better you get at the sport too, you do get a little more deconditioned because you're just a little more efficient at everything. You're not pushing
Yeah.
as hard. And
Yeah.
so if you used to get like good heart rate spikes from your rounds, but now a guy like you're a black belt, and maybe a bunch of new students show up only for the next 2 weeks and you're rolling with the new students, yeah, you might get your heart rate up once or twice, but it's not like when we were at Marcelo's. So
Right.
there is a deconditioning effect there, and you have to recognize that. And I'll give Dan Koval a lot of credit for that because he was somebody who, and he talks about that all the time. That's why he's always like hitting the what do you call it, the rower and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
He lives on the rower.
Yeah, because Dan's so freaking good. Like
Yeah.
it's freaking amazing how good he is. And like you're not going to tire him out. So he has to go tire
Right.
himself out.
Right.
And he's
Yeah.
like the living embodiment of that. And yeah.
On his like third training session of the day, like, and doing
Yeah,
conditioning in between. You know?
I know. Because he's like, you fools don't challenge me. I need to go
Yeah.
challenge myself. You
I'm
know?
gonna ask him to come on at some point. So we're actually trying to work out a seminar for him to come up here.
Oh, that would be
I,
great.
I missed
No,
him.
he's great. No, I love his jujitsu. I like him, and only great things to say about him. But yeah,
He,
it's
he once said to me, which never left me. He was like, we were just like after training, just like I got fucking destroyed. And
mhm.
he was like, I think I was like a new blue belt or something like that. Oh
Uh-huh.
no, I had to be like a maybe like a two stripe blue because like that's when I went to Marcelo's. And he was like, "Yeah, I don't let people work." He's like, "I'm like the final boss at the end of a video game. The final boss doesn't let you work."
No,
You know?
yeah, it's
And I was
true.
just like, "Holy shit, that is such a good philosophy." So now all these
Hmm.
like young kids, like I know the speed at which I do things, like is definitely like at their level. But like
Right.
at no point in time am I like just giving up positions and letting them like
Oh
use me as a
yeah.
grappling dummy.
Right. Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
all from Dan.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, it's funny. We talk about things that grind your gears. I'll turn it to jujitsu for a second.
Yeah,
That I see these things in these discussions now more, and I know we were morons when we were white belts too. So like, don't like, it's not
yeah, yeah.
like this is not like like, man, we were so much better. It's like, no, I get it.
Probably worse because we didn't really have like YouTube and stuff like that.
Exactly, exactly. But I will say the one thing I see more of now is like a lot of arrogance amongst guys who have trained less than probably a year and a half about
Yeah,
like things they can do. But it's like, if don't do that, because like we know when you're lying. Like you don't even have to
yeah,
see you roll. Like, and then when I do see you roll and you go for some really strange heel hook entry right
yeah,
off the bat, and it's
yeah,
like but then I pass your guard immediately and you have no semblance of like how to defend or even pummel
yeah,
it. Like then I'm like, come
yeah,
on, like don't do
yeah,
that. And I know like Shoyerol does they have like their voicemail thing on their
yeah, yeah,
Instagram.
yeah,
That's all I hear is these kinds of stories, and I see it at my gym too. And I'm like, oh my God, guys, please stop. It's just
yeah.
really cringy. Like I know, and I like you, so don't worry, you're not proving anything.
I had what was it like in the last couple months? I had like white and blue belts like trying to cartwheel past me. And like number one, they're fucking cartwheeling like over there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So like you're
exactly.
not even
Yeah.
like coming towards me. Number two, you want to know how you defend a cartwheel pass?
Yeah.
You just slightly back up. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It is like
Right.
the easiest thing to defend. You can see it coming a mile away. Everyone's going nuts about this armbar that somebody caught at, I think, was it ADCC, one of the trials recently, where some guy went for a cartwheel pass and he just got like viciously armbarred. I'm like, yeah, because he took his arm, fully
Hmm.
extended it, placed it between your legs, and then tried to go over, and the guy just caught it. You
Right.
know, like
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure it looks cool when it works, but like 99% of the time, that shit does not work.
Oh no, exactly. And you kind of have to learn your lesson too. Like I learned and it wasn't even me being like ridiculous. Like I remember when I was a newer blue belt, I went to Phoenix, Arizona, and I went to a Gracie Baja gym there, and they were very gracious in having me as a guest. And they had this like 23-year-old black belt that they just like fresh off the plane from Brazil. And they're like, yeah, you roll with him. And I figured, speaking of not taking it easy, I figured, okay, well, he's way better than me, but he's not gonna like go that ham on me. Like we started standing, slapped hands, and while my arm was still extended, he tried to jump for a flying armbar, and it
What?
taught. He was like seconds away from getting it. Like I was able to pull out, and I would have broken my arm.
Yeah.
And it was that hard, that much force. And I remember thinking, I'm never extending my arm out that far again, ever. Like if
Yeah.
we slap
Yeah.
hands, it's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm
Like
not.
from here.
But it's to Dan's point, like that was a final boss move. And I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? I'm never, it was a good lesson. I mean, I'm not saying you should go flying armbar your students, but
To a
as a black
guest.
belt to a guest, I know it was ridiculous. This guy just turned it on 11 from the beginning. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a long round.
That's fucking crazy, dude.
Yeah.
Oh
So
my
that's,
God.
yeah, that was a big one. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's fun to laugh about the negative stuff, but it is also, I don't know. I think it brings it back positive sometimes because it's just like there's so much good stuff out now too. There's a lot of bullshit, but there's also a lot of
Yeah.
good stuff out
Yeah.
now too.
Yeah, there really is. What's like, okay, so let's bring it back to a little positive stuff. What's like your
Yeah, it's
favorite thing about jujitsu?
my favorite thing about jujitsu.
Or one of your favorites?
I think I touched on it earlier. I like having kind of like a team and a place to go and people to be around that are kind of committed to getting better at this thing, or that you like sports, and you can kind of just go and do this
Yeah.
common hard thing together. I like that aspect of it. I like that it's something you can kind of grow with because it's definitely changed for me over the years, like a lot. Um, and I've always been able to sort of, and as like a non-professional, like kind of reinvent how I want to continue training and still do it like with dignity. I like that about it. I like being able to go between. It's kind of like this. It's actually something I love, being able to train gi and no gi. I
Hmm.
know like a lot of people now just like no gi, but like if I get really burnt out on one, I just can train the other. Like I'm feeling extremely burnt out on no gi right now. I have to be honest with you. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sort of like taking this week to like shuffle things up and not train no gi and instead go to some gi classes just to it's kind of like this analogy probably won't land if you're not into like powerlifting, but it's like raw and equipped lifting. Like
Mm,
I actually look at them very similarly that, equipped lifting, it's like the numbers are bigger and crazier, but it's still powerlifting. It's still squat, bench, deadlift, and you're just using different gear. It's just kind of like jujitsu. Like people, I really do think, yes, there are differences, but not really. Like you
yeah,
use the gi to do certain things and you don't have it, and you don't use it.
yeah,
And I like that. I like my brain likes variety. I think that's why I vibe well with conjugate type training and whatnot.
yeah. I put the I put the jacket back on actually recently because we're both under you're at Master Sky at HQ and I'm
Hmm.
at an affiliate gym up here
Hmm.
and it's mostly no gi, but we recently PJ put on uh two gi classes. So I'm just doing the one gi class per
Nice.
week, and I'm like, this is fucking fun. You know what I mean?
It
Like
is.
I don't give a fuck. It's fun. I'm like making people go flying, hold, you know what I mean? Hold them. Like I just like all the grips. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like it's fun, and I almost kind of view it as like strength training in a way. It's like just this. It's like that first gi session in like a year and a half. I was
Hmm.
like, this is so fucking grindy and slow. I was like, I totally forgot, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like helping my no gi game like significantly, just kind of like pummeling in and digging in for hooks. It's just like when I take the jacket off, I'm just like in. You know what I mean? It feels
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like that. I like that variety. I think if you're not, I mean, there's nothing wrong with training only nogi, but I do think you kind of miss a little bit of sort of the, I don't know. There's like a soul to the sport that lives in the gi. And
mm,
it's not an endorsement to only train one or the other, but there is or condone or condemn somebody who's only doing one or the other. It's just yeah, I can't personally visualize ever not training one or the other.
mm-hmm.
So I have a hard time relating to the no-gi only crowd on
Yeah,
that level. But I
yeah,
understand why they like it. It's way more exciting, electrifying. The more I've learned about wrestling the past year, you get to apply more of that, and that's kind of fun. And wrestling is quite fun. I find it a little more fun. Ironically, I find wrestling a little more fun than judo, to be honest. So
mm,
I, in that regard, but yeah, I like that. I like the thing I like about jujitsu. I'll give credit now that we're talking about it to a good friend of mine in California, Matt Salinas. He's a 10th Planet black belt and he owns 10th Planet Mission Viejo. Really cool school if you're out there. And he always said that he feels like he can never get bored with jujitsu because there's always something to learn. That like
yeah,
there's always something you can get better at. And like when he gets a little bored with something, he like flips the script. I could the past, I think like 6 months ago, he went on this like intensive journey to learn sumo wrestling. And I was like, Matt must have been really bored because he was like, he like really went
Yeah.
hard the other way. But I mean, he had so many different like insights, philosophical insights, different things about your base and your standing base and how to move and not be moved that came from that. And
Yeah.
that's what he does. So he's very different than 10th Planet in that regard. Like he was very like he always brings in, and he has like judo teachers there. They actually have gi stuff at his school sometimes, but because of that, like they're doing
Yeah.
judo and this sort of thing. So I feel like I feel that way too about jujitsu, that you can never get bored. And I feel that way about strength training too, like being in the gym. Like I never really get bored of this stuff. Like probably even I get less bored of this than I do jujitsu sometimes, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
there's always something. There's some weird adjustment you can make to a machine or a bar or a resistance curve, and there's a like an interesting pairing of exercises that you can do to do this or that. And it's just like, to me, it just is so much fun.
Yesterday, I've been my right elbow is like trash, and so whenever I'm doing any like horizontal pushy type stuff, or even just like tricep accessory stuff, my elbow kind of
Mhm.
gets a little cranky. And so yesterday, lifting God knows what 15, 20 years, I was just like, I'd always done like dumbbell skull crushers, kind of like
Mhm.
palms facing, and I was just like, let me
Yeah.
just try palms facing me. And it
Oh
was
yeah.
like, oh my God. You know what I mean? It was just
It's
like this like and like it was like almost like over supinated, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And
yeah.
it just like this is super cool. Like and like I was like just nerding out on this, like, and I did like 20 extra reps because of
Exactly.
this discovery.
No, it's awesome. You should try that on like pulleys or bands too, like coming down. I give a lot of credit to
Okay.
Matt Wenning, who's become a good friend and mentor to me kind of in the past few years too. He like constantly has you switching your grips. Like I was coached by him for a while too with tricep exercises. And I remember I hadn't done, just by some stroke of luck or whatever, when you were talking about skull crushers, just the old fashioned, just palms facing the ceiling. So like
Yeah,
pronated.
yeah.
I hadn't done that in so long last summer. I remember after the first day, I was sore for like 5 days after. It just
Yeah.
completely changed it, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, that kind of stuff. It's like, that's what we mean too, going back to the beginning, full circle, like variety. It's just, it can be like, yeah, you need to work your triceps every Monday, but as part of your program, but it can change the movement, that can be as simple as that.
Yeah.
You can get very nuanced, and you kind of have to, the better you get, but it can be as simple as starting with that.
Yeah, totally.
Mhm.
This is awesome, Mark. What
Thank you.
can people expect from you next? I know you just had a big remodel. What are you, any big things coming down the pike for you?
Yeah, I mean, my two giant priorities are, number one is to get uh Arian Carpio, the wrestler I'm working with, to the Olympics. So get her to qualify and get her there. So
Oh
to
yeah.
the best of my ability and anything I can do, that's like kind of my number one priority. And then another thing I'm really excited about is on, like, with her, and then on the higher level of things, Mateus Deniz and I are going to be working together doing
I
his
saw
strength
that.
camp here. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and
Oh yeah.
I really like, he's going back to ADCC, as a champion, 2 cycles ago. He's hungry and ready to show that last time was like just a blip, and so it's gonna
Yeah.
be fun. Like I'm really gonna enjoy working with him. I'm already enjoying it. It's been a lot of fun. He's like a very, very intuitive athlete too, like, and he's very friendly. Like, he comes off, I think, very friendly in interviews, and he very much is, but he's very smart, a very, very smart athlete, so
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see what we can do. So we're just kind of done our first few sessions, and I'm kind of like building out the longer program. So if I can get her to the Olympics, him to get back on the podium at ADCC, I'll feel like cloud
That's a
nine,
good
quite
year.
honestly. That's a really
That's
good year.
that's a really
That's
good year.
amazing. I mean, honestly, the stuff I kind of dreamed of. And then honestly, outside of that is just I've been really excited to build out and have like a real team here. It was fun doing a lot of things alone, but the bigger it gets, you can do nothing alone, and nothing is done alone. So my assistant coaches here, like, really trying to build them up. We're gonna be offering. We have things like kind of all hours of the day now. So there's personal training basically like anytime you want it. We have a class on Saturday that has been going really well. It's kind of a strength and conditioning basics class. It's led by Marcelli, one of our trainers here, and that's going really well. So, if you're more of the class type and you want to sort of dip your toe in, we have that, and it's on Saturday mornings at 10. But we're probably, because it's going well, it's creeping the right way, trending the right way. We'll probably add another day at some point to build that out and just continue that way. We're kind of piloting nutrition counseling and whatnot too. Like in the past, I've done a lot of that, but mostly just as it relates to like helping people cut weight and dial in their macros. But nutrition's a lot more than that. So bringing on like precision nutrition coaches to come in and really work with people the way I work with people, the way you work with people on training, to work with them on nutrition. So that's kind of the goals through the end of the year. Like so there's a lot of, to me, that's enough to stay busy. I'm really excited about it too.
That's quite a bit. I mean, that's like, you just described like 10 years worth of work right there. You know what I mean? It's like,
I mean, it took 10 years to get there. So
yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, for sure. Where can people go to learn more about you?
The easiest place is DiSalvotraining.com. Like, we recently redesigned the website, so I have to plug that. It makes it very easy to get in contact with me or anybody here if you need to. You just fill out the form at the bottom of the page and we'll call you right back or email you. You can find me on Instagram too. I am on Instagram, so you can DM me there, but I don't take it personally if I don't respond right away, because I don't check the non-friend ones very often. Like, I'm
Go
not
to the
like glued to
website.
it. Yeah, go to the website if you want to get in contact with me. And yeah, those are probably the best two ways to do it.
Cool. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes as well as your Substack info and all that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark, it's been a pleasure. Really great having you on, man. Good to see
Thank
you.
you. I likewise. It was really good to talk to you and good to see you.
All right. Thanks for listening to another episode. If you could like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube, I would very much appreciate it. Additionally, if you could leave a 5-star rating or perhaps leave a review, I'll be your best friend. And make sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at graybeardblackbelt if you're not already. And yeah, I appreciate the support. So I always want to continue to build this community. So if you ever have any questions about anything that we discussed on this episode or anything that I post about, I'm happy to field any questions. So just make sure to DM me. I'm pretty responsive on there. And yeah, until next time.